This is the signing.
We're members of his congregation for many, many years. That was in the old country. We kept up, of course, our friendship when they joined us here in Israel. Rabbi Wein doesn't need a lot of introduction. He's quite well known in Israel, particularly the impact he has had on Israel, the effective work of the Destiny Foundation in bringing important works of Judaism to the attention of everyone. The tapes, the lectures, the videos are outstanding. He is the Rav of the Unusual of Rabi, which is a partner with us in all of the programs that we do. We will be taping this program, so those of you who want to make it available for friends to keep it, it will be available a week after the program. All we ask is that you make a contribution to the Lone Soldiers Shabbat dinner that we sponsor. As you know, once a month we host 200 to 300 soldiers who are Lone Soldiers, Hayuim voted in. So help us support that program, but the tapes will be available to you. Very few of the rabbis who have come from the States have had the impact on Jewish life in Israel that Rabbi Wein has had. It's a great privilege for me to introduce an outstanding Rav, Rabbi Berl Wein.
Thank you very much. And hardly wait to hear what I have to say. Just in opening, I'd like to thank again Miriam and Sam Kubek for all of their help. I'd like to also thank the publisher Matthew Miller for suffering with me and for his expert work and good friendship. I appreciate it greatly. And I also like to thank my friend Osher Shapiro and Rabbi Finkelstein from the great synagogue, who have contributed to making the synagogue live up to its name as being the great synagogue in Jerusalem. Producing a book, writing it and having it published, even though I've never had the experience, but I'm told it's akin to having a baby. And to a great extent it is, because it's a product of a great deal of effort and also of much tribulation and trial until it comes to fruition. It says by our father Yaakov, Vaye'av Yaakov es Yosef mikol echad. Yaakov loved his son Joseph over all of his other children. Kiven Skunim, because he was a child, Ben Skunim. So Rashi says Ben Skunim, two interpretations, both of which are valid, as everything that Rashi says is. One is because Yosef was born when Yaakov already was old. And so Ben Skunim is from the word Zakein, even though Yaakov would live many, many years thereafter. But he already felt that somehow he was no longer what he was before. The second interpretation that Rashi says is Ziv Ikunim, that Joseph looked like Jacob, and that the events of Joseph's life mirrored those of Jacob's life. And so to speak, he was the most personal of all of the children that Yaakov had. Well, this book of mine tonight, if I may be so bold to say it, is my Ben Skuni. Even though Yaakov would have Binyamin after Yosef, and I have also 2 books that I'm annoying Matthew with. But this book is at a certain period in life, when one reaches a certain age, so one appreciates the gifts that the Lord has allowed one to have, and health and the ability to continue to do something for the Jewish people. And also, if I may say, it's probably the most personal book that I have written, because in it, many times I say what I want to say, which I haven't always been able to say in other books that I have written and been published. You're always at the mercy of many factors. And this book, more than any of the other books that I've written, is pretty much me. And if you will read it, I hope you won't be as disappointed as I am sometimes in reading my books. Why history? So there's a famous story that the philosophy professor at the Sorbonne posted as the final exam for the PhD exam, one question on the board: why? And there only were 2 correct answers that were accepted. One was why not, and the other was because. And that really is the story of Jewish history also. Why history? Why is that important? Well, first of all, why not? I think the burden of proof is to prove that it's not important. And certainly because it gives us something that I feel that almost nothing else can give us. It gives us a sense of identity. It tells us who we are. It tells us what the background to our lives is. It gives meaning to current events, because you see, current events are wild, unpredictable. Nobody but the New York Times knows what's going on. How can such a thing happen? You know, all of a sudden then everybody's a chacham in hindsight. Oh yeah, we saw it coming. Like my financial advisor. But nobody sees it coming. Anistoros Lashem Elokeinu. Niglos Lonu Lavadenu Adolo Masas is called Divrei Torah Hazos. The Lord does not make us his partner, so to speak, in seeing the future. But he demanded of us that we see our past. Schori Solam, Binu Shnos Dor Vador. Think about the past. What happened in previous generations? Ask your father. We live in a time when children don't ask, they ask their parents not about grandparents or great-grandparents, they ask them for the keys for the car. But the meaningful conversation between generations is pretty much lost in our time. Your elders, your teachers, talk to them, and they will tell you. Jewish history is pretty much a neglected subject in the Jewish world. It's neglected in the religious Jewish world, for reasons that I will discuss. And it is neglected in the secular Jewish world as well. It became the property of academics, of people who are interested in what color shirt Rashi wore, but are not very interested in Rashi himself. And because of that, therefore, there is no question in my mind Why do Jewish people suffer from a collective amnesia? They don't know what, where, who am I? And if I don't know who am I, then I become whatever shade of current political correctness forces me to be. I have no attachment to my people because I don't know anything about my people. I don't know why I'm not part of my people. And I don't know what purpose there is in being part of my people. So therefore, history allows us, forces us to define ourselves. Where do I fit? My Rebbe in the yeshiva, Reb Mendel, used to say that if your grandparents are proud of you and your grandchildren are proud of you, then you're pretty much going to be all right. And I thought to myself over all the years since I heard that 60 years ago, what a truism it is. Because I want my grandfather to be proud of me. And I certainly want my grandchildren to be proud of me. In fact, since I became a grandfather and now a great-grandfather, I've started to behave myself. I want them to have a high opinion of me. And I want them to know from me who they are. Because once a person has self-identity and self-worth, that person has the equipment to deal with the vicissitudes of life that will always come upon us. All of the surprises. The thrust of this book is that there really are no surprises. Everything that is happening today has happened before. It's happened many times. It's part of the pattern of Jewish history. There are ebbs and flows. There are better times and times that are not so well for us. But knowing that it's happened before somehow makes it easier for us to deal with what is happening now. I want to read for you a tshuva from Rabbi Moshe Trani, who was one of the great rabbis in Tzfat. The tshuva is written in the year 1558. The tshuva can be written today. In 1558, and don't forget, in Tzfat, the Bet Din at that time consisted of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Kurlian, who was the Talmud Muvak of Rav Moshe Cordovero. The Ari was around. Rav Moshe Alshich, the Alshich HaKodesh. It was an all-star team. There arose a question regarding the kashrus of vegetables. Now that's a new question, right? Bodek, Gush Katif, Mahadrin, I got a piece of parsley at home, it's got 5 Efsherim, not one piece of parsley. Nobody in our house even eats parsley. So you'll say, well, listen to the tshuva, right? So the Bet Din in Tzfat, they had a question about certain agricultural products, and they decided that those products were permissible and can be eaten, and they had no problem. Now, there are a few rules in Jewish life. One rule is there's always another rabbi. The second rule is there are always those that don't believe rabbis. The third rule is there are people that always play one-upsmanship on you, who know exactly what God wants. They have him in their pocket, And they have no doubts as to what the correct thing is. So therefore, there arose a group in Tzfat that said, no, those vegetables are not permitted to be eaten, even though it had the certification of the Bet Din of Tzfat, there Moshe Trani the Mabit, who is one of the great poskim in all the history of the Jewish people. So somebody wrote to the Mabit about it, and he said as follows. I'll read it in Hebrew, if I may. That also comes in patterns to Hebrew. He says, Al ken yatzati lifneim l'shacher pneim l'limtzo chen beineim. He said, therefore I'm sending you a message. I want you to listen that it should find favor in your eyes. Al diyu chasidim harbe. Don't be too pious. Harei lahem mashos Torah. Is it not enough for you what the Torah has forbidden? Tov v'yosher hu lios yirei chet. It's very admirable to be a person that's afraid to sin. Lachkor al abosor she'ochlim. To find out what kind of meat you're eating. Im nishcheta v'nivdeka al yedei mumche. Was it slaughtered and inspected by the right experts? Shetia menukeres heitev. That it was deveined properly. And you should stay away from things that are in doubt. However, but to make new isurim that previous generations did not know, that's not right. And then he says, to make it that in your own family people won't eat in your home. This is 1558. This is not 2011. And that there should be discord in a home. And he says, Echad yochal basar, echad lo yochal basar. One will eat the meat, one won't eat the meat. Echad yochal gvina, echad lo yochal gvina. One will eat the cheese, one won't eat cheese. Kroving lipore, bebirchei zimun, gamkein. They won't even bench together. Wein, taruv zel aleinu levadenu. And he said, so what does that got to do with us? Well, how does that belong in Judaism? Wein ochlim, and they don't eat any food that rabbis have certified to be kosher. Yesh bazeh chilul haTorah. That's a desecration of Torah. B'fnei ha'omer kein al Rambam v'al gedolim acher. So the problem is not new. Not new. I only eat this, I only eat that, I can't eat in your house. You know, Zadie, I'd like to come, but, you know. So it doesn't make me feel better, but I know that it's a 500-year-old problem, a 600-year-old problem, probably a 6,000-year-old problem. There's, in the yeshiva we used to say that Adam Rishon didn't eat the apple right away, but he didn't know if it was kosher or not. So it's an old problem. It's an old problem when we've survived 600-700 years with it, so we'll survive it again. We'll be able somehow to make peace with it. Even though, as we see, it has many disturbances to it. It has many side effects. The question of rabbis and laymen, this book that I wrote, you know, the Rambam said that if you have his book, the Mishnah Torah, you don't need any other book. You know, so the Lord overheard it. And therefore, there's been no book in the history of the Jewish people that has spawned as many books as the book of the Rambam. Last year alone in Israel, there were 300 books published regarding the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. There are many, many thousands of books about the Rambam's Mishneh Torah. The book that he said should be the only book that you need. So one has to hesitate to say that if you have my book, you don't need any other books. However, if you want a short history of the Jewish people that will give you the background of everything that is going on today, and do so in a thematic fashion, not in a chronological fashion. There's a chapter about women. Now, women have been a problem forever. We didn't discover it. So how will the Jewish society deal with the problem of women, of marriage, in different circumstances? In a world where most women were illiterate and little more than beasts of burden. What did the Jewish society look like? And how did the Great Revolution occur for women in our time? I mean, today it's de rigueur that every Jewish daughter is going to attend the Beit Yaakov or a seminary or an Ulpana, or, and you're going to know the Rashba and the Ramban and the Mesilas Yesharim. I mean, we've created a Frankenstein. But how did that happen? Why did it happen? And how is it that something that 200 years ago was unimaginable in Eastern Europe today is not only accepted, but it is the norm in all the sections of religious Jewry? So one has to see the pattern. Anti-Semitism also didn't start now. We look at the history of the Jewish people. So, for instance, there was a Greek by the name of Apion. And then there was a Greek by the name of Flaccus. And they were anti-Semites. We're talking now about the 2nd century, from the 2nd century before the Common Era to the 2nd century after the Common Era. The large Jewish community that lives in Alexandria in Egypt. Alexandria in Egypt, the Jews felt that they were in such good shape there that they built a Beit HaMikdash there. It was called the Beit HaMikdash of Chonyo. Chonyo was the son of a Kohen Gadol, descended from Shimon HaTzadik, and Chonyo wanted to be the Kohen Gadol. But, however, it turned out that they elected his brother and not him. So in the time-honored fashion of the Jewish people, he went out and he made his own shtiebel. He went to Alexandria and he made a Beit HaMikdash. And it operated for hundreds of years. And it was very successful. And the Jewish community in Alexandria grew and felt that they were as worthy, if not more worthy, than Jerusalem. Because they had their own temple, and they were wealthy, and they were sophisticated, and they knew Greek. So, why not? Now, when Jews are successful, as we always are, that's also a pattern. The non-Jewish world doesn't view it with the same eyes that we do. We say, isn't that great? Look at the contributions we have made to Western civilization. Look at the Nobel Prizes that we have won. Look at the medical discoveries. Look at the high tech that Israel has. Anybody has a cell phone in the world has a piece of Israel within it. It's hidden naturally because of the boy around there, but it's there. But the non-Jews non-Jewish world resents it. And after a while, and the while can be hundreds of years, it boils over. That's an irresistible pattern. It has happened over and over and over again in every part of the globe that Jews have lived. And therefore, one has to at least be aware of it. Whether one can prevent it or not is a different discussion. But one has to be aware of it. And eventually the Jewish community of Alexandria was destroyed, put to the sword. There was a great synagogue in Alexandria that even this great synagogue doesn't imitate, doesn't equal, that there were so many seats that they had to raise a flag to tell you when to say Amen. I guess they didn't have Chazan Adler, I don't know what, but it had thousands of seats. It was the most magnificent structure in Alexandria. The people in Alexandria resented it. Why should the synagogue be so beautiful? Why should it be so nice? And because of that, therefore, eventually Alexandrian Jewry was destroyed. And if we read Amos Elom's great book, The Pity of It All, which describes German Jewry in the 19th and 20th centuries, until the rise of Hitler. So he shows clearly that the more the Jews became German, the more assimilated they became, the higher the office that they attained. 30% of German doctors and lawyers were Jewish. Franklin Roosevelt himself in 1933 said that he understood Hitler because there were too many Jewish doctors in Germany. I wrote in one of my brilliant pieces this week, it's too bad that Hitler didn't live till now because he would speak at the United Nations. And, all of a sudden Gaddafi's a Russia. 3 months ago he's at the United Nations and everybody's applauding him. He's building a mansion in Englewood next to the Jewish shul. And you have to let him do it because after all, it's a free country. Today, he's a war criminal. Ma kara. What happened here? Well, that's the hypocrisy of the world, which we should also become accustomed to. We should not expect differently. We should not be naive. All of Jewish history teaches us to be realistic. So therefore, when rabbis write things that are not necessarily complimentary to enemies, so then the rabbis get arrested. I am not here to espouse any particular political view, but anyone that's a student of Jewish history, even a cursory student of Jewish history, will realize that we can't expect much from the world. And by the error of expecting, it leads to great problems. There's a chapter in the book on Messianism, which is a favorite thing about Jews. We have raised the bar of the Messiah so high that he can't come, because we've left everything for him to do. Right? So why should he come? Maimonides says that the Messiah will do very little supernatural events. But he said the world will operate just as it's operated until now. He said he will free the Jewish state from foreign domination. You know, so George Mitchell won't come visit us every month. But not much more than that. The exiles will return. So we see exiles return. One of the great miracles of our time. There are miracles that you can see in front of your eyes here in Israel. You don't have to wait for the heavens to open. I always say every time that I walk to the post office, so it's a 20-minute walk and a 30-minute wait. So I walk through a park on Ramban to get to Karen Kayemet, to the post office. And there's a park there. In the park there are little children that are playing, and there are old people who are sitting on the bench. But the Novi Zechariah said that, right? Oh, Yeshvu, Skeinim, Skeinos, Nechutzos, Yerushalayim. Old people will sit in the streets of Jerusalem, and they'll watch their children and grandchildren at play. So what do you want from God, right? He told you what happened, here it is. But you have to stop to notice it. Otherwise, it's just, somebody said the kids make so much noise. They said that's what they're there for. You don't get it. And the Novi Yeshayahu says the exiles will come back, and he describes them old and young, broken and firm, strong and weak, crippled and healthy. L'vo Tzion Berina. So, what do you want from God? He told you what happened, it happened. Now, what do you do about it? None of all's in your court. So we say, no, the Messiah is going to come. He's going to fix everything. And by saying that, we postpone the Messiah. My Rebbe used to say in the yeshiva in Yiddish, he said, Mashiach darf kommen zu fartige Tisch. He asked, it's like a guest. So when the guest comes to your house for Shabbos, so you don't say, okay, now would you help me with the table? How about bringing a chair? Let's put out the tablecloth, and the food, and what kind of host is that? That I do with my wife, but otherwise, you have company. He said, Mashiach darf kommen zu fartige Tisch. Mashiach is going to be a guest. There'll be a state. There'll be Jews, there'll be kibbutz goliaths, that's what the Rambam says. Oh, so now we can expect that he'll come. But if we leave everything for him, right, we don't have to do anything, sit back. The reason that Jews felt that way, we have a good reason to feel that way, because we got burned a lot with messiahs. Christianity, Islam, false messiahs. The Rambam himself lists 3 false messiahs in his time. The debacle of Shabsai Tzvi, which destroyed us, till today we pay the price of Shabsai Tzvi. After Shabsai Tzvi, so the Jewish people split the two. The Reform said, in my opinion, is a direct result of Shabsai Tzvi. The Reform said, you see, the whole thing is a fake. Forget it. We're never going back to Israel. We're never going to, just forget it, right? We're Germans, goodbye. The Germans are the Mosaic persuasion, but we're Germans. And the other Jews said, in Yiddish there's a phrase, if you burn your tongue on hot soup, then even if I give you a cold gazpacho, you blow. So we're very wary of Messiah. Shapsai Tzvi, Yaakov Frank. Part of the problem that religious Zionism faced and still faces is whether or not it is tied up with the Messianic dream. So the original founder of Mizrahi, Yaakov Wein, so he said, it has nothing to do with Mashiach. It's a practical program to help save Jews and build a Jewish state in the land of Israel. And Mashiach is out of the picture, but that never could happen. And then you had other people that came and ejected Messianism. And then you have the problem of failed Messianism, which is a terrible, terrible problem. And in our time, we also, we have had Chabad, portions of it, that have been swept away by messianic fervor, and no one knows what the result of that will be. So messianism is a pattern. How to deal with that pattern, how to recognize it. Well, we find that in the Gemara. The Gemara brings two opinions. One opinion was that the troubles of messianism are such, the ewish of the Mashiach is such an awful time. Ayachmene, I say below ayachmene. Let it come, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to be there to see it. Call me when it's over. I remember when I was the head of the OU Kashas, so I took a certain group of rabbis to see a slaughterhouse. Now, there is no nice slaughterhouse in the world. It is not a pleasant experience. Taking life is not pleasant. The animal doesn't want to die. And it's a bloody mess. So after one of them watched the first bull being dispatched, so he wasn't feeling too well. So I ushered him out. He said, call me when they make the hamburgers. So that's, we also would say, he said, I say, call me when they make the hamburgers. I let the Mashiach come, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to be there. And the other opinion was, he said, I will sit in the dung of the donkey of the Mashiach in America. So these two different opinions have survived throughout the Jewish world. And we'll see, the Chazal said, for instance, at Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, Elu, Divrei Elokim Chayim, that they're both right. What they meant is that both opinions will exist throughout Jewish history, and they do. They're both here. And you have to be able to recognize that they both have validity, and somehow, even if I may approve of one and disapprove of the other, nevertheless, I have to realize that there is another opinion. And that takes a sophistication. To be a Jew means that you're a sophisticated person. You're not a simpleton. You're not Sheini Yodei Alisho. That's why Chazal say, Psachlo. Don't let him remain a Sheini Yodei Alisho. In today's world, I don't want to say it publicly, but in my heart I feel maybe the majority of the Jewish people today are not Rishoyim, God forbid, but they're all Sheini Yodei Alisho. I don't know what to ask, I don't know who to ask, I don't know what the question is. And therefore, we are at a great disadvantage. There's a chapter here about medicine and health in the Jewish world. So again, the rabbis, all the Achronim have said that anyone that practices the medicine of the Talmud today should not do so because of the fact that it is not effective today. Their words for it is nature has changed, meaning technology, knowledge has changed. But there's no question that if you have MRIs and CAT scans and X-rays and all the other diagnostic tools, you've got a leg up on medieval physicians. That's not to criticize them, it's just to say what we have today. But a great example of that is tobacco, smoking. So, in the when tobacco came to Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries, it became very popular. So it was advertised as being healthy. It was supposed to aid digestion. Certainly the digestion of the tobacco growers. It's supposed to be very healthy. So from there came a heter, a leniency, to allow people to smoke on Yom Tov, because it was l'tzorech ochel nefesh. You're eating, it's healthy, you know, it helps in digestion. Not only that, in the Muslim world, smoking usually was from a water pipe, an argila, and it had hashish in it. So we have tshuvas from famous rabbis that they would smoke an argila with the hashish in it before prayers. And they said, you know, that the heavens opened up for them. And they saw angels, they were stoned. So in our time, for anyone to encourage anyone to smoke, you're encouraging the person to commit suicide. It's assisted suicide today. And yet, because of the tradition, Hasidic Rebbe's used to smoke a lulka, a pipe, famous for it. All the descendants of Kotz, Chasidis, Ger, etc., smoking a pipe because that was the Rebbe smoked a pipe. And if the Rebbe smoked, so the Chassidim should smoke. And in the yeshivas also. And since smoking and tobacco is addictive, so it's hard to turn off the spigot. It's hard to say no. But again, if you don't see how it happened, so you don't have an appreciation of what the problem is. Finally, I want to talk to you, there's a chapter about Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Our right to the land of Israel was given to us by the Lord. Even David Ben-Gurion, when he testified before the Peel Commission in 1936, said, our deed to the land is the Bible. We are not here because of the Holocaust. The Holocaust is an unbelievable tragedy for which we have no answers. But that's not the cause of the Jewish right to the land of Israel. I'm always amazed at the Israeli government that when foreign dignitaries come, the first thing they do is rush them off to Yad Vashem. You should take them to Ir David. You should take them to Hebron. They should take them to where we are. That's where we are. That's why we're here. Independent of the Holocaust. But we ourselves have painted ourselves into the corner. And therefore, when Obama comes and says that we're here because of the Holocaust, it's very hard for us to say anything because we say it. It's very hard to criticize all of the negative statements regarding the state of Israel when they were all quoted directly from the Israeli newspapers. So he may not need me. If I am not for myself, then how can I expect anybody else to be for me? That's one of the fundamental weaknesses. And Jews have always been ambivalent regarding the land of Israel. Ezra comes, the Jews in Babel don't want him coming. Ezra curses them, it doesn't help. They don't come, they're in good shape in Babel, why should they come? And even though there's been a constant Jewish presence in the land of Israel for centuries unbroken, there's always been an ambivalence, because it's a hard country. Eretz Ocheles Yoshua, Asher Avoneho Barzel. That's difficult. It's not going to be an easy trip. And because of the fact that it is not easy, there are very, very good excuses and reasons for not coming, and then eventually for not supporting. So again, that's a pattern. You'll see it in the book. It didn't happen. J Street was not invented today. It happened earlier. Much, much earlier. And again, once you know that this is the way it is, so, okay. Because we see that in spite of everything, you know, there's 6 million Jews in Eretz Yisrael. There's a Jewish state. It works pretty much, except for the light rail, but otherwise it works. Somehow we all have a good quality of life. Has the longest longevity much in the Western world. I think it's second only to one of the Scandinavian countries. So, okay. The greatest pattern in Jewish history is that the Lord promised us that I will be with you. V'shov Hashem Elokecha eshvuscha richamecha. God comes back with us. And the Jewish people are a nation because of Torah and of faith and of what has sustained us in all the generations. And anyone that knows any Jewish history at all will realize the truth and accuracy of that statement. My friends, I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. I want to thank again the great Synagogue and Miriam and everybody else that was involved. For those of you who wish to purchase a book, my grandchildren will appreciate it. And I will be at the back table. I'll be happy to sign as many as you wish. We should always meet at good and happy occasions and be zochet to see Nechama Sion and Inyan Yerushalayim. Amen.
Turn your phones back on. I promised I'd remind you that my wine will be at the back table to be able to sign books, and we'll wait.